Ready to start?
Sure.
My name is Curtis Blaze. For those of you that don't recognize me, I'm here with Adam Ledford, the Sac City Administrator. We're going to be discussing the budget amendment, which there will be a hearing for it held on May 24, 2010. This is the budget ending June 30, 2010. Tell me, explain to people what this is, first of all.
Sure.
And what will happen is, just so you know, there will be a copy of this underneath the video for people to watch, so you can follow along at home.
Sure, understood. The budget amendment is a statutorily approved program by the state. What it basically entails is there's a certain expectation that government entities, and that includes your schools, your counties, your special municipal entities, your cities, and even the state for that matter, is required that if they're going to exceed the original budget expectations in any particular expense area, that they're required to at least once a year do an amendment to the original budget. And of course within that, the state has segmented your budget into particular categories, which may include multiple departments, to explain exactly what those amounts would be. And of course there is also a statutory requirement that you not exceed the expenses for a particular category based upon the amount that it is amended to after that fact. And that's one of the things we are audited against every year.
Okay, first thing to just get out of the way with revenues.
Mm-hmm.
There aren't any amendments to the revenue.
Correct. And part of that has to do with we don't know when the FEMA and state money for the disaster will be coming.
It might be after.
It might be after the fiscal year. The state doesn't have the same legal requirements for me to record additional revenues coming in as it does for additional expenses.
All right.
So being that we don't know which fiscal year that's going to come into, I've simply kept it off of the amendment since it is, in the end, usually we are somewhere under our original estimations if you've looked at our previous budgets. So in the end, there might be some gain, but for the most part it'll be a wash, likely.
All right. So we'll move on to expenditures and other financing uses.
Mm-hmm.
Public safety. Let's just go through them. What's public safety?
Public safety, according to the state, includes your police department. It includes your fire department on our side. I'll just talk about what we have departments that included in those areas. And then, of course, any expenses we have with the disaster sirens are a separate budget program as well called disaster.
Okay.
So those three elements of our city budget are included in the public safety line item. And based on the current projections we have, we're expecting about a $15,000 over budget expectation for the public safety area.
You're going from $323,650 to $338,650.
Correct. And that is a direct response to the cost associated with the disaster, the two disasters that were declared in December and January. The police department in particular spent a significant amount of time adding people onto the staff during the disaster. We had multiple officers out during those few weeks, so there was overtime associated into that cost. At one point, we had all 4 officers out at one particular point. They did some search and rescue requests where they went out of town to deal with some drivers that were stuck in the snow and the snowbanks before they closed Highway 20 that Monday. They also took part in actually closing Highway 20 and, of course, having an officer there on site that entire time at both ends of the city when it was closed. And then the other activities, of course, include activities in town as far as assisting in other situations that were going on in town during the storm.
Okay. Moving on to public works. What is that?
Public Works, we're anticipating a roughly $30,000 increase in Public Works once again, and this will be a common theme during this conversation. A lot of this has to do with the FEMA disaster, the FEMA declared disaster. The $30,000 in the Public Works Department includes streets, street maintenance, road use. It includes The airport is one of the line items included in that line as well. And for the most part, the entire $30,000 has to do with overtime hours and the cost of generator fuel for, we were keeping this building open part of the week where the power was out. We also were keeping they were responsible for the cost associated with keeping the generator up at the shelter, which was a 24-hour-a-day requirement up there. We also had a few other pieces of equipment using a lot of diesel fuel during that time, as you can imagine. And then, of course, we went through what would be the equivalent of 2 years of salt and sand during that roughly that 3-week period of time at one point. So there's a significant amount of cost built into Public Works. Public Works is one of our largest areas of activity.
All right. Health and Social Services, there's no amendment on that. That's staying the same, 000. Culture and Recreation.
Culture and Recreation include a lot of departments. That would include your aquatic center, that would include your parks, that would include the cemetery, that would include the library. All of those go into the into the Culture and Recreation line item.
And you're intending to spend $15,000 more.
Correct. Most of that has only one factor, and this is one of the times I won't talk about FEMA, actually. What it is we created a trust and agency account for the library this year. There were some questions about moving forward about direct donations to the library, not to the foundation, not made to the Friends of the Library, and how to deal with that money.
Can you explain what a trust and agency is?
Sure. Trust and agency is it's one of the few line items in a city budget that at the end of the fiscal year do not return all of the money back to the general fund. You might have always heard the term use it or lose it type of concept in budgeting. Trust and agencies are a line item budget item, much like our long-term capital for the fire department, which roll over from year to year.
Okay.
So they don't lose their money at the end of the fiscal year. And being that this is money being donated to the library, one, we want to be able to identify it as being the library's money for their purposes, and two, there's also the need to being able to roll it over year from year because they don't always use it in the same fiscal year. And that's actually the situation here. Since we don't really know, trust and agencies are a tough area to budget for, because you have no idea what type of money, one, they're going to receive in a fiscal year, and two, what they're going to spend in a fiscal year out of a trust and agency account. So any time the trust and agency account has any expenditures of significant size, there's a very good likelihood you're going to have them included in your budget amendment because you had no indication about what type of money they would have or be spending in that year.
Okay. So what's the actual $15,000 is the donation?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And debt will probably be more in the neighborhood of $8,000 to $9,000, to be all honest.
Okay.
One of the things, and this may be a good time to point that out, we developed this budget amendment and are required by state law to do so when we only have information on 75% of the fiscal year. There's still a quarter of the year to go fiscally at the time that we do a budget amendment.
So it looks like you're overestimating what you'll...
Correct. You always try to be you always kind of err on the side of being a little over, because you're not going to get another chance to amend this before the end of the fiscal year. And if you amend it or not, and then you end up being over in a particular line item, then you're going to get written up by the state auditor. So there is some kind of...
If you're even $1.
Correct.
Okay.
If you're $1 over in one of these categories, they don't look at it as a major violation of any sorts, but you will get written up on your report as expenditures beyond the budgetary allowances.
Okay. Moving on to